a lot of butterflies and joy to be here with you today. So, when I set out to write this book, it was going to be a very happy-go-lucky book, actually. It was going to be the story of my adventure to eat a meal from every country in the world, which took about 4 years, Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, and that was the blog she referred to. And this is why National Geographic became interested in publishing my memoir. And week one, my editor says to me, cooking the world is not exactly a normal thing to do. And she challenged me, and she looked at my outline and she said, there's something else here that you're not sharing. What is going on with you? Why would you be doing this? So driven week after week without stop for 4 years. And she sent me away to think about it. And I came back and I said, are you sure you want me to go there? Because this is gonna take a while to explain. There's a lot going on. And she, to her credit, she said, yes, go for it and write. And what started out, what she expected would be a 25-page background bit of information, took over the book. And what it was really about for me, I think, cooking the world, yes, I love cooking. I wanted to keep learning. I wanted to, teach my daughter to love world cuisine. This is her when we were cooking Nepal. But it was also about me finding my belonging, my place in this world, and that deep yearning from a childhood in turmoil. So here's my daughter when she was just born. It's my hand and my husband's hand. And again, it was about giving her something more. Some of her first solid foods were eating, Afghanistan, 7 months old, kabeli pilau, which is a rice dish. It was also my husband, very picky eater when I met him. He's the yin to my yang. He would always sniff his food. When I met him, he'd never had fresh spinach. He had no idea what an eggplant was, which was sort of ironic since he grew up on farmland in rural Oklahoma, but that was a different time. There's a lot of canned food then. So over time, he did agree. To his credit, that's an avocado grapefruit smoothie, which is an unusual combination. But it's moving forward without me. Don't do that. Anyway, he tried these different foods, and for me it was about finding this. This. I'm a front seat kind of girl in school. Don't pass me a note. Don't whisper to me. I want to learn, and so I wanted to keep learning, and so I did, and so as the book evolved, though, I realized in that digging deeper that it was a crisis of motherhood. So here I am, 7-month-old baby, looking at her, thinking how precious she is, and I want to offer her the best life possible. But I didn't really know how to do that because of the childhood I had. I write in the book about the cracked foundation I was raised on, and for me, it was imperative that she have so much joy in her life and always feel like she belonged and never have a question where her family was. And my greatest challenge was finding that sense of belonging and that idea. People talk about unconditional love. I talk about an unconditional home. So it all goes back to my mom's, when I was a little girl and raised by my very unconventional, very creative mother. This is a picture of her part of the kitchen. As you can see, or you may not be able to tell, but I talk about it in the book when you read it, there's a railroad tie that she used as a spice shelf that she lugged home one day, she found somewhere. Under the pies and under the little makeshift counter is a dresser. That dresser stored my clothes because I slept in the living room with my brother. That's how small our apartment was. Oops, it's moving. Again, haven't figured this out yet. Technology sometimes challenges me. Okay. So anyway, so this is where it all started, and the thing about her kitchen was, because there was no living room, because our beds were in it, we were sleeping in it, that this was the center of the home in so many ways, both practical and by necessity. But it was also where she kind of created this environment where I really didn't know that I was poor, and that there were these challenges, and for a long time I was mystified by some of the things we went through. this is my brother and me with the German tree cake you'll read in the book. It sounds like this outrageous thing, and it was 19 layers, but there are these very thin crepe-like layers. It's an almond marzipan cake. There's a kind of a bittersweet apricot glaze, and then the dark chocolate on it. It's really wonderful, and it takes all day to make, sometimes 2 days, because of all these thin layers. And when you slice it, it looks like the rings of a tree, which is where it gets the name. So she was doing these things, and because of that inventiveness, and because in the kitchen we could eat and do anything we wanted. In fact, if we couldn't afford to buy the ingredients to make a recipe, she told me to draw the recipe. So again, that creative spirit, it's the idea that there's a difference between poverty of resources and poverty of spirit. Later in the book and in my life, the challenges piled up, and so the foster homes and all these sort of things happen, and I end up, through a turn of events I'll let you read about, in Europe. And while it was a tremendous experience, I got to go to 12 countries by the age of 19. This is me in Spain on the upper left with my best friend, visiting is her family's home. Down here I'm in Tunisia for my senior class trip. In the middle I'm on top of the Eiffel Tower, and this is also Paris on the right. Amazing experiences, really wonderful opportunity, but also following an incredible amount of loss and trying to figure out who I was, where I belonged again. And this time, taking to the streets of Europe to get that culinary education that my mom had started for me. So going into the boulangerie and smelling the warm baked bread and all the stinky cheeses and sort of being fascinated by that. So then I come to my happy ending. This is my husband and me, and this is me on my motorcycle. I think I went through several phases of rebellion, going through all these things, and so there's a lot of different ways. I was chasing the idea of home. I was running away from home. I was doing everything. I went back. I'm touching it. That's why. Okay. Anyway, so we get into the blog thing. And this is our very first meal. That's how little my girl was when we started. This is Afghanistan. And the two on the left, the one on the right is Iraq, making pita bread. But a wonderful way for me to work through some of these things. And I don't think any of us start off with this like deep psychological issue and say like, here's exactly what's going on with me and here's how I'm going to resolve it. It wasn't like that. I just started doing this thing because I was going crazy as a new mother, and I knew there was some deep part of me that needed to make everything okay for my daughter, but also for myself. And so I look at food as this walking meditation. And if you like to cook, then you know that feeling of putting your hands in the dough and working it, and how your mind, everything just kind of fades away, that stress, whatever's going on, or you're able to think about it while you're working the dough. And so it's a very meditative process. What was ironic about Cooking the World was I was looking very far away at 195 countries, trying to figure out on a very unconscious level the answers to my problems. But what ended up happening was that I found the community around me. Things were revealed to me that I was in a place that wanted to hold me, that I had a community that loved me, that I did have the home I needed. This is from when we cooked Bulgaria. This is in the book, a very small part of the book, but I just wanted to show you. This guy's named Nick. And he was so I'm sitting at the dining room table in my little neighborhood reading up on what on earth to make for Bulgaria. I have cookbooks all over the place, and I'm going through them, and the doorbell rings, and my mom happens to be visiting, and so she goes to the door, and she comes back in with this guy, and he's tall. You can't tell here because that's kind of like a tall angled ceiling there, but he had to be 6'4" or something like that, and she brings this guy in, and I'm thinking, who is this guy that she's brought in? And she doesn't live in Tulsa, so there's no reason for her to know him either. And she says, Sasha, this is Nick from Bulgaria. And I'm like, what? And I guess when he came to the door, he was selling books for his summer job, like a door-to-door salesman, and he had a thick accent, and she asked him what his accent was, and he said Bulgarian. And so she invited him in, and I immediately asked him to sit at my dining table and go over the recipes I was going to make. And it was really fun because he told me, these aren't things, we don't really eat that, and this is what we eat. And so these are the dishes he recommended that we try. And this is a cheese and flaky pastry kind of pie that you slice, really, really good. But it was just so funny that he was right there in my own neighborhood. This young woman, I was at a baby play group at the library, just down the street from me, about a mile. And I'm talking to her, and I told her, well, she was really nice, and she has a nice kid, and we hit it off. And I said, well, I've got to run, I've got to go cook Finland. And she said, oh, really? I'm half Finnish. And, I didn't know. And I said, really? Wow, well, I'm having all this trouble figuring out how to make this bread called pulla. Would you like to come to my house and help me make it? And she did. She came to my house and helped me make it. And we formed a friendship. And it seemed like everywhere I went, there was somebody willing to help me, either from these parts of the world or who knew somebody who was. There's an African market 1.5 miles from my house, which in Tulsa, Oklahoma, is a really big deal. And I think some of what I learned was that my perspective was closed, right? But it doesn't mean my community wasn't there with things that I could enjoy and kind of expand my world that way. And there's also things like this drink. It's called Lomi Lomi from, way over on the other side of the world near India. And I heard about it or read about it in some of my research, but nobody had a recipe for it. And this is where technology really played a fun role. I sent a tweet out looking for asking some of the big hotels on the island and things, anybody have this recipe? And I got a tweet back, and there it is, exactly how to make a Lomi Lomi from halfway around the world. And so we were able to try it, and that's my husband looking a lot happier. It's mostly honey, so of course he's happy. There were people also, like the gourmet, she used to be the Asian correspondent for Gourmet magazine when that was around, Karen Coates. And she was really cool. She helped me figure out how to make these grilled eggs, and I'm showing them here tonight because they're in the book, the story of making them. And it's not it looks exotic, but it's actually not. You just whip some eggs with brown sugar, a little fish sauce, and you can add things, and pepper, and you can add things like chive or even some lemongrass if you want. And then you funnel it back into the hollowed out egg and steam it and then grill it. And you'll see when you read the book, there's a connection between that recipe and a recipe my mom made with Jell-O as a little girl. So what was fun is as I cooked the world, I started to find these connections between the past and the present. This is this is also in the book, the Guinness Cake that went viral and ended up, Rick Steves on NPR, who's a big fan of this cake. Really good. If you have time this week to make it for St. Patrick's Day, I would recommend it. And it's also an easy kind of dump and stir recipe. But cooking the world also, in a very important way, did do what I needed it to do, which was help me deepen my connection to my daughter and help me figure out how to be a mother. And one of the things that was great was making these old family recipes with her and sort of giving them a new identity, new memories attached to them. So this is the Artisan French bread that's in the book. And she's very little here when we cooked France because it was alphabetical. But showing her how it works, she helped knead the dough. And the time I spent in Paris, I was so lonely, I was so heartbroken, but yet here is a joyful memory with the same recipe. So we can breathe new life into some of the things we experienced. This is the German tree cake, so now you can see exactly how it's done. There's a broiler, and you're doing layer by layer, and so it starts to pile up. And you have that apricot every once in a while between the layers, and it sort of melts into it where, except on the edges, it's a little stronger, but a really fun, beautiful recipe. And here she is making vegetarian sushi. Somebody made fun of me recently because I said, well, my daughter didn't like sushi till she was 2. And they looked at me and I said, yeah, I guess I have no perspective because they're hard too. I mean, I've got a 16-year-old that doesn't like sushi. But she did, before that, I would try to take her to a restaurant, or if we'd gone, I'd say, try the avocado sushi, and she had no interest. But once she made it, she got her hands in there, and she got to pick what vegetables she wanted to put in it, and she put her favorites, which asparagus, she would put avocado, whatever. And now it's one of her favorite things. I mean, she's always asking if we can make it. And she's convinced that she doesn't like spicy food. And here she is biting into a Thai bird chili pepper, which, to be fair, I mean, she's really not biting it, but she has a very high tolerance for spice. And so when she says she doesn't like spicy food, she means really spicy food, because she can handle a lot. And she's, we had a lot of tea parties. And I'm teaching her how to do this North African pour where you do it again and again, and the tea becomes frothy like a beer. It gets this head on it. And so here she is with perfect aim with her tea party doing the pours. It's an amazing experience to watch her. And of course she can't choose these moments. She's wearing nothing but a Home Depot apron and her, but I had to take a picture. So ultimately what ended up happening is going through this journey of cooking the world with my daughter and going through these memories and writing this book. I did find that piece I was looking for on, it's always a journey. There's always, I talk about at the end of the book, that there's no easy answers after hardship. But I think I did get myself a lot closer to clarity and just finding, I think the answer for me was going inward to inner peace, right? Because I was looking everywhere else for the solution for, when is the perfect family going to come along, or when are my neighbors going to be great, or when, always outside. I never looked to myself to find that calm that I needed to move forward. And so I think that's the message I'm hoping to bring, is that if we start with self and find that calm there, then wherever we are, we can be okay. Anyway, I'm thrilled that you're here. I'll be happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, I'll be right here signing. Yeah.
Question: where did you find your ingredients? Online, locally?
All locally. So I didn't. I decided that if I couldn't find it locally, I wouldn't make the recipe. And there are a few reasons for that. Early on, I was a little bit more exotic with my choices, and you'll find that in the later part of the book where I go into it. But I also decided that I wanted the recipes to be bridges. And so if you were saying, "Ooh, they eat that," with this sort of grimace, right? If I was choosing the most shocking, provoking, like, okay, in Cambodia, they eat fried tarantulas. So if I'm making those things, I feel like I'm building a wall if I'm getting everybody to have these big, huge reactions that way. So I thought, well, what about, we eat eggs, they eat eggs, let's see how they eat eggs. Or we eat carrots, how do they eat carrots in Mongolia? How do they eat carrots in Morocco? So that, I really like that example, because all you have is shredded carrots, and it's, in Morocco, they're adding orange blossom water, which tastes like kind of floral, and they're adding fresh squeezed orange juice and cinnamon. And in Mongolia, they're putting raisins and a little vinaigrette, basically, and some garlic. Totally different, but something you can make on a weeknight if you have the ingredients. So, but yeah, I didn't mail order anything. I wanted it to be something, because Tulsa's a pretty small city, so I felt like if I could do it in Tulsa, most cities people would be able to do it, and hopefully even smaller communities too.
Did you have any total disasters with any of the recipes?
Yeah, and you're going to read about one of them from Angola, where I basically almost killed myself. And a lot of that was a big lesson in cooking without community, right? Because if I had an Angolan grandmother at my side while I was cooking, she would have made sure I didn't make the mistake I made. And I don't want to ruin it for you, so I'll just leave it at that.
So is that your garden?
This is called Global Gardens. That's actually another moment in the story where these kids they're in the public school system, and they have this program. It's an after-school program where the kids get to grow their own produce, and then they make dishes from around the world with their produce. And a lot of them aren't in a position like I was as a little girl, where they just don't have a lot of resources, and so. It's a great program for them to be in, and I went and spoke with them, and this was, in the book, her name is Josie, the woman who runs the program, so that was the day I went there with my daughter, and it was a wintry day. But it was wonderful to see these kids, when they had me there, they were eating, they were all sitting outside, cross-legged, and they had just learned about Japan, and they invited me in and knew exactly where I should sit according to Japanese custom, and to take off the shoes and all this. It was really special. Yes?
What was your daughter's favorite country?
Oh, that's a good question. Nobody asked me that. They always ask me what mine is, and I'm like, well, I can't choose. It's like choosing a favorite child, right?
Exactly.
She loves anything where she can help, especially even at the table. So I talk about DIY soups, which in Laos there's a dish. It's pronounced and spelled different than pho, but it's very similar. It's spelled F-O-E, and I've been told by that Karen Coates woman that it's pho. But it's the broth, it's the noodles, it's all the different herbs, and so you put all these things on the table, and then she wants to pick and add her lime juice and all this. She really gets into that, and I think she's almost 6 now. I think that's very typical of that age.
Yes, I think it's just a beautiful foundation that you made for her. That is just so special. She'll always remember that. I know she will.
Well, and I hope so.
Yeah, it's really, that's something.
And the things she doesn't, like the 7-month-old, one of the people say, well, how come you didn't just travel the world? Which obviously for financial reasons. And but I think what I'm hoping is that when she was very little and she won't have the memory, her taste buds are affected very young. Even in the womb, they say what your mother eats can kind of, if she eats a lot of spicy food, you'll be more tolerant of spicy food. And so I think it will have, in that sense, a lifelong impact. At least I hope so. And she's still so curious. She'll say, Mama, we have a map hanging in our dining room. She'll say, Mama, what country are we eating tonight? It's very cute. Yeah.
Do you ever let her go to McDonald's?
No, we don't go to McDonald's. No, I remember one time there was an emergency where we were miles, Oklahoma, sometimes the roads, you have several, like an hour between, seems like, stops. And but at that time she already became vegetarian. So this is something that's not in the book. It developed later, or sort of it was unrelated to the narrative, but she said to me, Mama, is chicken chicken, when she was 3. And so she was realizing that there's a thing that lives and breathes and has feathers, and a thing she's eating. And I said yes, and she stopped eating it right there. And little by little she did that with everything, and she cut it out. And the day she said, Mama, I love bacon. And I said, and she'd already cut out ham. I said, honey, that's the same thing as ham. And she put that bacon down and was done. Pretty amazing. That's a whole nother book. I think I might do something for my vegetarian daughter, who's only 5.
Does she go to a regular school, or do you homeschool her?
I wanted to homeschool her, but I think I worried about being able to give her everything that I wanted her to have, and I think maybe if the blog and the book hadn't been such a locomotive at the time that she was getting started with all that, I might have done it. Yeah. But she, she's in a really great program, and I think she has some. She was just telling me that she was in this little play, and they did all the historical time periods, and so I learned that, did you know Cleopatra is not actually Egyptian, she's Macedonian Greek. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. So, yeah. But we do a lot of art in our house. Love, go to a museum, and we'll sit in the gardens and draw, and the food, of course. Yeah. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, I'm going to be right here. I would love to meet you and say hello on a more personal level. Thank you.
Thank you.